the team in Melbourne with Chris Morgan, who's the project manager at FrontierSI side for AGO Analytics Labs, to give everyone an introduction to who's on the phone and then to kick off the presentation. So thanks everyone.
Thanks Phil. Welcome everybody to the AGO Labs webinar. So I'm Chris Morgan from FrontierSI, who'll be the program manager for this labs program. I have with me on the in the room Darren Maher, the Assistant Director of Specialized Feature Extraction, Nick Rusk, the AGO Elevation Domain Lead, Assistant Director. In Canberra, we have James Coffey, who's the AGO AI Pilot Manager, Scott, who's the AGO Project Manager, and Simon Wellington, who's the Machine Analyst Discovery Manager. So, switch to the next slide. So our agenda is for AGO to talk through the AGO Labs vision, then to go through the 3 challenge topics, followed at the end by a live question and answer. So as Phil mentioned, there's a Q&A button up in the top of the Zoom menu where you can enter your questions in as the labs program goes through, as this presentation goes through, and we'll go through those questions at the end and answer them. So over to James to talk us through the AGO.
Yeah, thank you, Chris, and thank you, FrontierSI, for hosting. Yeah, so I'm James Coffey. I get to run AGO's AI pilot. For those who aren't aware, AGO is the Australian Geospatial-Intelligence organisation, and we're the national lead on geospatial-intelligence and its role in our national security requirements. In the room with Chris in Melbourne, two of our key personnel from our foundation production environment, and that's one of the various functions that we have. We have others in the realm of intelligence production and hydrographic mapping, and we do a lot of these key functions for the department. And one of the newest functions that we have is actually one around capability delivery. So about 4 or 5 years ago, we started to actually be responsible for the geospatial systems and capabilities delivery across defence, and that's actually why we've highlighted these three key elements for this audience. That we have these, our mission involves intelligence production, geospatial data production, and also this capability delivery service. Now, the next slide. Can you advance one? Yeah. So the next slide is a graphical depiction which we are fascinated with, and my boss is insistent that I show this whenever I can, because it actually highlights all the major projects we're delivering. Those are those orange boxes in that middle section of that graphic, and each of those top categories highlights the different domains that each of these systems are in. So we're now delivering GeoInk collection systems, so it's imaging collection and processing and dissemination. And we've also we're also delivering GeoInk mission systems. So they're the things that we use to produce and process spatial information, so we can create, geospatial intel products, geospatial intelligence and information products, I should say. And we also are now responsible for delivering or for making dissemination systems, which are those systems that disseminate them across all of defence. Now, if we go back just a few years, we didn't have a project. Now we're running 4 simultaneously, and we're just in the process of adding a 5th, which is our next GeoInk mission system project. Scott Lonnie, who's here with me today in Canberra, in our Canberra meeting room, he's one of the people who's responsible for delivering that item. Now, the reason why all this is important for this audience, the reason why this all brings us here today, is that each of these items represents quite a severe capability increase and a technology increase for us in AGO. Each item comes up with a requirement for new technology and new technologies that we haven't actually necessarily been that exposed to. Which leads us to our next slide. Yeah, which leads us to this key thing that we've been talking about in AGO recently, in the last couple of years, this innovation shortfall. The the demands that are being levied on us with all these extra projects and all this, and all of this new capability that defence wants, and all these new things we need to do to achieve our national security objectives. Every one of them comes with this enormous innovation overhead and this considerable technology change requirement. And frankly, it's more than we can currently meet with our current resources. It will take us an enormous amount of time to build those resources, and frankly, we're probably not the best position to answer all of these things by ourselves. Which is why we came to FrontierSI and this entire labs concept. What we're trying to do is we're trying to actually find better ways to work with Australian industry and academia. We're trying to actually find ways to leverage resources that are already out there. I mean, our history with Australian industry and technology acquisition in defence, for any of you who've actually worked with this before, you'll know that we have never claimed to be particularly quick. We've never claimed to be particularly exciting in the past. We tend to be safe, and we tend to rely on known and well understood concepts. Our innovation attempts tend to be very large, grand affairs, and we can only afford to do a few at a time. And right now, that's probably just not going to cut it anymore with this rate of change that's dependent, or that we are required to meet. So, could I?
Yep, sorry. We'll go to the next slide, please. We'll keep it on this slide.
So could you go back a bit? We just had a bit of a technical glitch on our side. So what we're trying to do with this effort, we're trying to do a new thing with how we engage academia and industry. And this will be a learning experience for us and for you all. What we're trying to do with Frontier is to push out with 3 short-term 6-month projects that are going to be limited in total cost, and we plan on punching out a few different key research questions. A lot of the questions, you'll probably see them, or we hope someone sees them and says these can't be research questions. They're things that we already know, or things that technology that we already have answers for. That we don't need to do much research in, and that's great. Like, these problems don't have to be solved by entirely new R&D work. We're very happy if the solutions that you find are not new to you; they just need to be new to us. And hopefully, if this works, the idea is that we'd like to keep this going as a continuing program. This process of asking relatively small, focused questions and throwing them out to Australian industry and academia to see what these broader answers might look like. So that's our expectation. Yeah. So. Actually, Chris, would you like to cover this one, or do you want me to cover it?
No, go for it. It's good if you can cover it.
Oh, sure. So what we're looking for in these proposals, if anyone's already seen the documentation that's gone out there, that Frontier have posted out, what we've described are these use cases. We've tried to describe as much as possible the through life problem that we have. So for instance, the elevation topic goes from how we collect the data, process data, work with it, maintain it through its lifetime, and then end up producing outputs at the end. We don't actually expect anyone to solve all of that in one go. It would be lovely if someone could, but we don't need anyone to solve it all in one go. What we want is someone to is some participant to actually be able to come up with an interesting way of solving some part of it. That's all you need to do. We're nominally just after interesting and innovative approaches to these things. We don't expect you to know or to get everything right. What we're after though is something that can help us with some elements of it. With these topics, with the timeframes. We want outcomes within within 6 months, but those outcomes don't need to be a new system or capability has to be delivered in 6 months. We just need insight and answers in that timeline. Where this is all leading to is that we want to take that information, and this is one of the key reasons why we have Scott in the room, is that we want to take this information and position ourselves so that we can then go out and either run a bigger trial or do more questions, or alternatively just go straight out and buy or acquire the various systems, or go out to industry as via an RFT or whatnot. And that's kind of what we're trying to position ourselves to do, to a much quicker, much quicker solutions. And as part of that process, of course, we expect to be part of this process. We expect to be part of this development process throughout. So we aim to have subject matter experts available throughout the project challenge period, so that we can actually help provide guidance and yeah.
We're also, James, if I might interrupt very quickly, as interested in, I guess, how the participants are going to, or envisage communicating and working with us, as much as what the technological or the research outcomes might be from these 3 challenges. So a lot of what we're trying to do here is work better with industry so that they can long-term solve our problems, because, as James has already alluded, we can't solve them all ourselves. Sorry, James.
No, that's okay. Thank you, Scott.
Are we ready? Are we able to advance to the next slide?
Yeah, thanks. So what we have for you is these 3 questions that we've outlined so far. One around beautiful contours and features unsupervised, which is about automated feature extraction from imagery, and one on our low-cost object identification models. These aren't the only 3 problems we have, but they're 3 problems that affect us day to day, and also affect the designs of our future capability planning. Progress, please. Right. So in the contour space, we have a key challenge of scale and processing that we are interested to try and solve. Our current contour production and contour and geospatial, current elevation data production and elevation data set production is organised around cartographic principles and in particular around map sheets. What we'd like to look at is whether we can pursue global data set or global contour solutions and global elevation data set solutions as well through that. I couldn't do the description justice. I might actually just do a very glossy review of these right now, and then we'll let any questions come in later, and let our subject matter experts address these as we go. Slide, please. The topic 2 is about really about how we start getting into the applications of unsupervised feature identification and classification. This is in large parts, or the specific problem that you find described in the background detail is about finding a way to really use some of these technologies that might not be ready for prime time. They're not ready to actually, in no way ready to replace cartographic production, but they might be ready to help complement and enhance our existing cartographic production methods. And so this particular topic is organised around how we might use some of our key advantages, which is in particular this very high revisit rate that we have over our key areas, and we have a great deal of data in depth over a lot of these places. Whether we can actually leverage that for a more I suppose intelligent unsupervised feature extraction, and ultimately a more intelligent change detection services. Slide, please. Yeah, and the third item is very much in the still in the research space. Low-cost object identification models. This relates to the challenge of building computer vision and pattern recognition solutions which anyone who's been sort of in that space for any period of time will note that it does take an enormous amount of time to build and train a model using AI techniques, or to prove a model using conventional raster-based pattern recognition techniques. So whilst we acknowledge that, we do acknowledge there's a lot of work going on in how to do either single shot or low shot model training. We would be very interested to hear on various ideas that are out there with regard to object model detection development techniques that require relatively little startup. And there's no, like, we realise that this in particular is very much still in a developmental state globally. We're just willing to see, or we'd be willing to see what Australian industry and academia can do about it. Slide, please.
Thanks, James. That was really good. So this slide is about what the Labs program provides. So it's a funding opportunity to demonstrate and present capability, quick turnaround with program management from FrontierSI, access to defence advisors, and there's marketing opportunities. So what we need from you, we need capability AGO does not currently have. Like James has said, it doesn't have to be new, it just needs to be new to AGO. We want insight into the challenges of working with AGO. So one of the big things, we want to get a lot of learnings about how we can do this better and improve from that. And the best way to do that is to try. And we want a technology with a clear path to operational use, so this could be taken on from AGO in the future. So the timeline, the EOI was released last Friday. Submissions are now open until the 6th of September, with the kickoff towards the end of September for this project, ideally, with the March 2020 completion of the projects. So we're now into the questions and answers phase of this webinar. So again, if you'd like to raise new questions, hit the Q&A button and answer your questions, and then we'll start going through them.
Sure. So, Chris, I might facilitate some of these questions as they're popping up in a couple of different things. So we had a question during the session about collaboration with university partners or the research sector, and the information in the briefing is that research organisations, we welcome them to be partners with the industry leads for this, but that the bids are led by a private industry company. One that I might push over to AGO to answer, Jim, is a question asking if international companies can partner with local Australian entities to deliver a project.
Yes, and the vigorous nodding of our project manager here says that's definitely the case, yeah.
Excellent. So while everyone thinks about their questions, please put them in either the chat window or the Q&A session. Note that we've also got, as introduced at the start, we do have some of the technical specialists from across AGO if people want to ask questions about any of the challenge topics themselves. One of the questions in the Q&A box at the moment is asking whether or not there are any parameters or preferences for using cloud infrastructure within AGO Labs.
Oh. No, there are no preferences. We have a we currently we natively use AWS services for our unclassified development. However, in the department we also have access to various other cloud service providers, including our and that's, I believe, Azure is one of the other service providers that are currently in place. But our own infrastructure is primarily virtualized with RHEL or Red Hat VMs as the basis for a lot of it. But we're perfectly happy with whatever we go with.
Yep, excellent. Thanks for that, James. A question in the chat window here is, maybe I'll push this over to one of the AGO team members to touch a bit on the evaluation criteria for the object detection challenge.
So by the evaluation criteria, so pretty much a broad guideline of what we're looking for in that space is we have a requirement to maintain the currency of the defence areas, the data and mapping products over them for training uses and so forth. So what we're looking for is criteria along the lines of tippers to help us plan or have that area updated. Things like the examples of like encroachment of urban areas towards the training area boundary. If it reaches beyond, say, a 25% threshold or a certain minimum distance towards the training area, that would be a tipper for an update of that area, the data in that area, or the road network internally of the area. If that's increased by 20% or more, we would require an update of the data to bring that road network to its currency. Outside of the actual area, it wouldn't really matter because it's not relevant to the function of the area itself. The example of the in the paperwork of the overhead power lines, overhead obstructions, high features that appear suddenly, that's sort of like an immediate tipper for updates for safety navigation in the air. Those sort of criteria are what we're looking at. Is there any more elaboration anyone's after there?
Could I just follow on? That's what Darren's given you is a fantastic description of of this very real problem that we have in an operational context, and it's one of these extremely valuable things is being able to reach into these key providers such as Nick and Darren to provide insight on this, and just to help though bridge the gap between that and the R&D work. So ultimately, when you're preparing a proposal, we would appreciate it if you could relate it to how it would help us answer or address any part of this. That can mean you can still respond in a very sort of research focused or an abstract focused around how you're going to solve one, or how you think your solution or your approach might solve or might be used to solve one aspect of this. That's fine, and we really encourage that. We don't expect anyone to solve all of this in one go, but we would really like it to. We would appreciate it if you could work on describing how it would relate to solving this immediate problem. Is that? I think that's probably. I'm just trying to provide that little bridging piece in the description of that. Yeah.
No worries. Thanks for that, James. So moving to the chat window, there's quite a long question that was essentially asking whether or not a particular organisation's capabilities would be aligned to one of the challenge topics. That's more up to you to assess. If you think your technology is capable of achieving some of the challenges outlined within the information document, then we would be very open to receiving a proposal from you. Looking at the Q&A window, first question up there is whether or not there's any preference given towards Australian industry involvement. So in terms of, just to provide further clarification to the first two questions about research and about international companies, the lead organisation for responses needs to be an Australian private sector company. So that's I guess a core part of this. They can collaborate with other research organisations or international organisations. That's fine. A question from Fabrice from Airbus, I think. So he's asking, could existing proven off-the-shelf solutions work for a few items or problems that are listed today? I think the short answer for that is yes. Absolutely. As Chris said, doesn't need to be new technology. It just needs to be new to AGO. So if you've got something off the shelf that already works that solves some of these problems, please submit a proposal. Question from Yulin Yang. Is it possible to elaborate more on what the object detection models are that are currently used?
Not in any great detail. Most of our current work is based on pixel-based matching, and it's used only in by pixel I just mean raster grid-based models. Some of those have been built through machine learning techniques, but we don't have any deep learning examples running currently. But they're all being used in an R&D context presently for object detection. I think I actually included we included a reference to a particular article as an interesting example in the documentation, which went into small airframes and their identification. But again, the focus of this task is more about low cost items in object detection, and in that context, we'd be happy if there was a proposal that said, well, we think we've got a good solution for complex objects, or a good solution, such as or complex shaped objects such as small aircraft, or if you came and said we've got an interesting solution for small differentiation between routine objects, like different types of like regular vehicles, for instance, or whatever they happen to be. We're more than keen to explore all the options. This is also one of the benefits of having so many problems to deal with, is that we get to be pretty broad in finding solutions.
Yeah, thanks for that, James. So a question in the chat window highlights that the problem statements and descriptions are generally all related to cartographic-like features, and wanting to know if there's any interest also in more intelligence relating to features and objects. I assume this is looking at not just where they are, but also information about what they are in terms of attributes and status. So a comment from Radio.
So the first two of the three were very much focused on helping to address some of the needs of our foundation production, or foundations geospatial data production functions, or our cartographic data production functions. For those, the third is very much in the generic space. That being said, though, the applications of this, whilst we're talking about them in the context of cartography, and cartographic applications, there's no limitation to a broader roles. And if someone thought they could turn any one of these items into a direct sort of activity-based or intent-based observation, we'd be really interested to hear that. That would be very, very exciting. That's it's what we actually. That's one of the reasons why we do all of these functions together in Australia, is because of the common value in doing it all at once.
Yep. Cool. Thanks, James.
I'm not sure if
yeah, sure.
Yeah, I'll just elaborate a bit more on that if I could, James. Thanks, that's really good. And in the foundation space, like our foundational data isn't just for creating cartographic products. It's a foundational data set that we produce, which is geospatially accurate, and it is to standards and schemas with strong attribution, so that it's actually foundational data to feed into GIS systems for it to be interrogated and used in that space. So any way to apply attribution to something that's automated, that can be given a good confidence value, we are definitely looking for that in the foundation space as well.
Wonderful, thanks for that. Looking at, we have a further follow-up to that question. Are the point clouds that I'm going to, so this is probably a good time to talk on data access, actually. So the question that's come in is said further to one that was asked earlier. When things are generated from point cloud data, are the point clouds 3D, and is data visualization part of the challenge? This is probably actually a better point to ask Jim and Scott to talk about data in general, in terms of what data would you prefer people to be working with for this project, as in people bringing their own data to demonstrate a capability, using things that are from a common source, or asking data from you. So can I get you to provide a comment more broadly on how people should address data within their proposals?
Sure. So it's Scott here. So we did look at AGO providing its own source data as part of this, and there are a couple of challenges around that, primarily around licensing, nothing very exciting there. So if a proposal comes in that requires AGO access or AGO specialised data, then we'll look at that. But we would also be very keen if could also source their own data sets as well. They don't need to be common across different proposals. That's not what we're looking for. It's not necessarily a race where everyone starts from the one point. It's not even a race. It's an approach whereby we're looking for demonstration of new technologies and capabilities, whatever the data sets might be. Now, we're still investigating some licensing challenges, and we'll continue to do that. But ultimately, we would prefer for proposals to source their own data.
Yep. Excellent. Thanks for that. So moving into the Q&A window, Deepak has asked whether or not for challenge 1, which is the beautiful contours challenge, whether the solution can be a raster DEM or whether it has to be a contour output. That's probably for Nick.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that one. I'll give you a bit of an explanation just for the participants to have an understanding of what we're looking at, because it's not, the contour piece is one part of the challenge, if you like, one product challenge. But really what we're looking for is a couple of key issues that we would like to find out from industry and academia if they can be solved. And if I just take you through step 1, which is the stereo pair discovery, you can imagine we have an enormous library of images, and what we're looking for is pairing up those non-traditional images. So at different capture points from different capture times, we call it fortuitous stereo. So images taken over different time periods. So that's one part of the challenge. The second part would be to create products from those pairs. So we don't want to limit the products to just DEMs or DSMs. We would like industry to think about all elevation products, which include point clouds and 3D mesh products as well. But yes, bare earth DEMs and DSMs are part of the problem, and we want to build up our elevation catalogue from an enormous library of images. And then the second part to it is the contour challenge, which is developing a global contour base derived from a bare earth model preferably, but having that seamless contour vector layer or tile cache that can be easily served and distributed to our customers. So in essence, the contour challenge is a derivative product, which is really building up our elevation product library through a vast amount of images. Does that answer the question?
Yes. Yep. Thanks for that. Okay. So Arma asks a question around, so the object identification models, what kind of objects are interesting to you? Are you looking at species, vegetation, urban structures? So what are the objects of interest?
Man-made objects. That's the easy one on that one, for that particular item.
Mm-hmm. All right. Nice and quick and easy. Angus has asked the problem of measuring change in land cover. Sorry, can you speak to the problem of measuring change in land cover and vegetation? I'm not sure which challenge that one aligned to.
I can answer that. With the land cover and vegetation, we generally don't go too deeply into that realm. It's very broad. It's more with land cover and vegetation. It's more in regards to its trafficability, how to cover across that surface. defences, as you would understand, want to know how to get their people and their toys from one place to another safely and easily. So it doesn't need to be that in depth. With like landform change, it'd be more along the lines of someone's decided to take the top off a mountain because they want to build an airfield on there, or there's been a massive snow melt or a flood and river direction has changed. There's really the only big landform changes that we'd be looking for, and natural ones we probably hear about in the news, but sometimes they're taking the top off a hill that can be hidden from us.
Excellent. Thanks for that. All right, so the next question relates to challenge topic 3, and Chris or James, if you can just remind me what challenge topic 3 was again, that would be great.
Low cost objects.
Cool. So the question says, we mentioned costs in terms of infrastructure and training time. It sounds like AGO are in the model exploration or I guess development, evaluation or refinement stages. What's your interest in the deployment of those models in terms of, I guess, hardware, resilience of deployment models in service, things like that? Is there enough clarity in that question?
There might be enough clarity. I think it always, it's one of those how long is a piece of string questions. I mean, at the moment we deploy we deploy for R&D purposes, and we can do that with pretty modest equipment and hardware with our current loads. A lot of the current models that are in development locally, I should say we don't have many models in development locally, but those aren't particularly intensive things. I think if we went, it would depend largely on how broad the application was. These things are always a bit challenging in that regard, and that's why I'm pretty ambiguous in my description. The biggest cost we see with these things is the training costs, and if they're in that or training and development costs, that's where we currently see the biggest peak of resource usage. That will, of course, if applied to deep learning techniques, that tends to sort of snowball pretty quickly. So in either of those two categories, we'd be interested in hearing about things, but we're pretty flexible at this point. We're still in that discovery phase.
Yep. Okay. Thanks for that. We have a follow-up question about the features unsupervised around the models, just to see if you guys could further elaborate at all on any unsupervised methods that you do currently use.
I can talk about this on the camera side, but it'll be very brief. Our current methods are extremely limited in large chunks of this, or outside the explicit foundation production realm, and they're still in that developmental, or really in that developmental stage or in that testing phase. I'll let Darren answer if there's anything to talk about in the real foundation production area of AGO.
You pretty much hit the nail on the head there, Jim. We really don't do any unsupervised identification. As like with the model learning development thing, it's a resource intensive place, and we don't have that resource to do that R&D and that innovation. Hence we have this project.
Okay, wonderful. So we've only got 2 more questions here. Just so everybody online knows, if you have more questions, please ask them. Otherwise, the webinar will wind up after we've answered all of the live questions. Another question from Deepak about the object detection. Does that include looking at live objects like human movements for situational awareness?
Sure.
Let's not, sorry, Simon here. Yeah, let's not limit it to static objects. I'd be quite interested to see what you could do in the live space as well. So, yeah, we'll keep it open.
All right, the theme I'm getting is the more ideas, the better. Okay.
That's a fair theme.
Question here. Yeah, a question here again from Evelyn was about a platform such as Slack that private companies could reach out to potential academic partners who might be interested in this program. We don't have anything like that set up at the moment. What I would say is that anybody who is interested in collaborating, either from the industry side or the research side, please feel free to contact Geraldine or Chris as the project team using the email up on screen, and we can try and facilitate some of the connections for organisations that are looking for that side of things. Otherwise, it would primarily be based on the existing connections and networks that you have. We wouldn't look to establish any kind of platform at this stage. If this does roll into a wider, longer-term program, maybe that's something that we could look at doing. But certainly, just for the next couple of weeks of this call being open, we wouldn't set something up. Just contact us directly. A question from Sebastian. As you mentioned that your largest costs are to do with training and development of models and techniques. Is that to do with the cleaning, processing and storing of reliable data? Could you elaborate on why this is important and whether or not solving these training challenges would fit into any of the AGO challenges?
Yeah, so is the time, so currently we're dependent upon, or for our model development techniques that we're using at the moment, which again, as I say, we're just in the R&D space, or just in our little, research space. There's the time taken to build or to actually cultivate training sets, which is pretty time consuming. That involves, just going through a lot of scenes and building up a huge catalogue of indicative or relevant data, and then quality controlling it, et cetera, et cetera. But then there's also the GPU of, or there's in the processing needs of actually training training a model using that that training data, which does add up pretty quickly in our experience. So yeah, those are the two elements. We have been like the two dominant sort of thoughts out there that we have found people talking about is using synthetic imagery, or synthetic training data. So that's either building real or finding real data and then manipulating it in some way, or alternatively just making it up from scratch. We're kind of dallying with those items, and but we're not very well placed to thoroughly explore that. We also don't necessarily have the time to or the ICT flexibility to experiment too broadly with lots of different ways of actually of experimenting with different hardware and infrastructure setups to actually do the model training itself. So we're experimenting with a few different types of ways of doing that, but not the infinite types that are out there. So those are the two categories that we would expect to see change, or expect to see ideas come out. But that being said, if there was a whole other field that we hadn't really anticipated, that would not actually either really surprise us that much or dismay us at all.
Okay, thanks, James. We've got a question around the object detection models. So the question is whether or not AGO will be able to provide any data for model training and testing. So I guess if you already have existing features that you have created, can you provide them to project participants to train the models that they want to build? I would love to. That was actually one of the original key concepts that we really wanted to do. In fact, it might be something we'd try and look at in future iterations of activities like this, or is that we've been considering the prospect of taking our training sets and just releasing them to the world and saying, if anyone can do better than this, get better than this P-score on this, on this quality check, give us a call and we'll
yeah, so it's certainly something we want to look at doing, but it's possibly, well, it is a bridge too far at this point in time. There's a lot of things that we need to sort out before we can actually do that. Yeah, but it's a great idea, and we definitely want to follow up on it, but just not for this particular version of this event.
No problem. And then a follow-up question to that one from Angus about any methods that are currently used in the actual training of models, both in hardware and software techniques that are used. I feel like we might have covered those ones earlier when talking about the models.
So can you just give me one moment? Yeah, so we're currently experimenting a bit with Oak Ridge National Labs models as some of their, with using some of their core concepts in AI and machine learning based, deep learning based models. But that's just where we're at the moment. We had to start sort of somewhere, and that's kind of where we're looking. That being said, we're pretty open in, we're not bound to any individual sort of school of thought or anything like that. We're not either that good at this or that experienced yet to really have much intelligent to say about that topic.
Okay, thanks for that. And a good final question from James Milner about whether the recordings will be available. Yes, this session is currently being recorded. We expect to be able to host that. We'll email the participants a link to that and put it on the AGO Labs website on the FrontierSI page, which is also listed on screen right now. So the question just came in about whether AGO is making the base imagery available for the project in order to train the models. This was answered a little bit earlier. It is possible to request that, but AGO's preference is that people provide their own data at the moment in order to demonstrate the capability. So with that, that's a closeout of all of the active questions. So unless we have something that comes through in the next 30 seconds or so, we might just see if there's any concluding remarks from any of the current panelists, and then otherwise wind up this webinar. So while we wait, Chris, James, or anybody else that's a presenter here, did you have anything else that you wanted to say that we haven't covered that you thought people might be interested in, or any closing remarks?
Sure, I'll offer just a quick thing, which is to thank the people who have taken the time to attend. We really appreciate it, and I also, I actually deeply appreciate the fact that I've got so many people from my own organisation here to assist and provide those key bits of detail. Yeah, so thanks for coming.
Yep, excellent. So if anyone does have any follow-up questions that come to you later on, feel free to email them to the address on screen and we'll follow up on those. Otherwise, thank you very much for your attendance. We'll email you when this presentation is available for those that weren't able to join. And we look forward to receiving everyone's proposals over the next month. So thank you very much. We'll close the webinar there.